circumstance in your life. For example, I was born in Landstuhl, Germany. I didn't have anything to do with that choice. In God's sovereignty and a myriad of human choices added together, my birthplace was Landstuhl, Germany. My dad was serving in the army, mom and dad were stationed there, and so that's where I was born. Many times, most of the time, choices that we've made are the things that affect our circumstances in our lives the most. We, both consciously and unconsciously, choose choices all day long. Action after action, thought after thought, belief after belief, word spoken after word spoken. Think of all the choices that you've made. Today, you decided to get up at a certain time, so you set your alarm. Some of you decided, I'm not getting up at a certain time, so you didn't set your alarm. You chose words today to speak to different people. You chose not to speak words to certain people today. You chose to be here today. Thank you very much. You chose to get dressed today. Thank you very much. You chose to put on either your left shoe or your right shoe first. Now, there's only one right way to do it, but I'm sure that there's some people out of here that put their left shoe on first. Your choices shape your minutes, your hour, your day, your week, your month, your year, and your life. And choices are a big deal because you get to choose them. Now, you don't always get to choose your circumstances, but you do get to choose how you react to the circumstances that you find yourself in. For example, the circumstance of me being born in Landstuhl, Germany, I had nothing to do with that. I could not choose that. I did not choose that. But, seeing that I was there, I chose to be one of those babies that was quiet, slept through the night, was very compliant, not very needy. That was my choice, right? So how do you decide what you decide? Are you facing any big choices in your life today? Are you dealing with the consequences of your choices that you have made? In today's scripture passage, we're going to observe lots of different choices that individuals were faced with. And we're going to look at what they choose to do and what we can learn from them. And here's our goal today. I want you to view your ability to choose as a gift from God. I want you to see your ability to choose as a gift from God. And we're going to ask Him to inform our choices today as we walk through His Word and view His character. Would you pray with me, please? Lord, as we look into your Word today and we hone in on this topic of human choices, Lord, I pray that you would speak to us. Clear our minds of clutter. Lord, help us in this next 30 minutes just to focus on your Word and what you want to say to us through it. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Please turn in your Bibles to Ruth chapter 1. Ruth is in the Old Testament. It's tucked in between the book of Judges and 1 Samuel. Our passage today happened over 3,000 years ago. Approximately 1100 BC is our time frame of our passage. The context is, well, it starts out in Bethlehem and then it moves from there, but it starts out in Bethlehem in the land of Judah. Ruth is a very short book, very beautiful, short and sweet, 4 chapters. We're going to walk through one chapter each week over the next 4 weeks. And as we look at chapter 1, I just want to highlight 5 choices that were set before the individuals in our story. 5 choices, and these choices are pretty common to all human experience. So hopefully we can apply them to our lives. Verse 1 of Ruth chapter 1. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. Choices. The first choice is either to stay or to sojourn. Either to stay or to sojourn, which just means visit or take a trip. A man had a choice. He was a man from Bethlehem in Judah. And by the way, Bethlehem means house of bread. House of bread. The judges ruled the land. This was before Saul and King David and all the rest of the other kings. And the man's choice was laid before him was either to stay in Bethlehem, which was experience of famine, or to go and sojourn or visit another place. This choice was on the table because there was a famine in the land. The man was married. He had a wife and 2 sons. He owned land in Bethlehem that he had inherited. It had been passed down through his family line. In fact, Bethlehem is contained in the land of Judah, which was given to the tribe of Judah. When God gave them the promised land, the tribe of Judah, their allotment, fell in this place. It became known as the land of Judah, and Bethlehem was in that land. And this man's clan received land in this area and had been passed down from generation to generation. The man was in the place that God had called him to. The man was in the place where his clan had inherited land. But things started to look dim. There was a famine. Food was scarce. And the question was, would God continue to provide for his family in this place during this time? Could he trust God in this place? Sure, it had been a place of bounty before, but now the shelves in the local grocery store were looking kind of scarce. And maybe he should go check something out somewhere else. He'd heard that the land of Moab had plenty of food. So he had a choice. Should he hang out with God's people in the place he was supposed to be, where there was not very much food? Or should he go try things in a pagan country where they had rejected worship of the one true God? Should he go to a place where other gods were worshipped? Should he stay or should he sojourn? Should he stay or should he take a visit somewhere else? So the man decided to sojourn, to see if the grass was really greener on the other side of the fence where God was not worshipped, where idolatry ran rampant. How about you? When God has called you to a place, to a ministry, to a job, to a spouse, to a family, what choices do you make when the famine comes? When tough times come to that place where God has called you? You know, there is sometimes when you need to cut bait and run, when it's just wise to leave a situation. But faith is when we stay the course and trust God to provide in the place where He's called us, even when there's a famine. So we need to be quick to stay in God's place where He's called us, and slow to sojourn in a foreign place just because times get tough. The man chooses not to stay, but to visit, to sojourn, to pay a trip, to pay a little visit to the land of Moab. And the next choice would be, once he's there, he's planned this little trip. Once he's there, will he come back or will he remain? Will he return to Bethlehem or will he remain? That's the next place. Will he return or remain? Verse 2. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife, Naomi. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab, and here's his choice, and remained there. They remained there. Remember, the first choice was to visit there, to sojourn there, to check it out. There was no plan to remain there, but that's the choice that he made. Elimelech, which literally means my God is king, he heads out with Naomi and his 2 sons for a visit. I don't know what he was thinking. Perhaps he was thinking, we'll go there, we'll get some food, we'll bring it back to our peeps in Bethlehem. Perhaps they were just going to go check out Moab and see what's up. Maybe there's some business opportunities there. Maybe the idol worship wasn't that bad, really, like they'd been told. Sure, they wouldn't be able to attend church anymore, but that wouldn't be that big a deal. They could just kind of do church in their house, right? Maybe having bread with some pagans is better than having a famine with God's people. So they chose to remain. After they check out Moab, they decide, we're not going back to Bethlehem. We're going to remain in Moab. Verse 3. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. So shortly after the decision is made to remain, Elimelech dies. The husband, the father of the family, is dead. And now Naomi's faced with the same choice. Will she return to Bethlehem, or will she remain in Moab now that her husband is dead? Now she's a widow. And being a widow 3,000 years ago in this culture, in this time, is a bad thing, financially and economically. Your husband, the male people in your family would provide for you. She's left all that extended family, and now she's in Moab without a husband. She's a widow. But she does have her 2 sons. So she decides that remaining in Moab is the decision that she's going to make. And not only does she remain there, she plants herself there because she allows her sons to go out and get married. Verse 4. Her sons took Moabite wives. The name of one was Orpah and the other Ruth. They lived there about 10 years. And both Mahlon and Chilion died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. So Naomi remains for 10 years after her sons get hitched. And as we'll see, both Orpah and Ruth are barren. There's no grandchildren. They have no children. So let's just recap where we're at so far. From Bethlehem to Moab, Naomi traded a famine for 3 funerals. Naomi's daughter-in-laws are barren, unable to have children, which is a big deal. In Bethlehem, she had her women's group. She had God's people. She had the presence of God. She had a husband. She had 2 sons. In Moab, she ends up without a husband, without 2 sons, and 2 barren daughters-in-law in a pagan land. So will she remain in Moab, or will she return to Bethlehem this time? It's the same decision that they faced as a family. It's the same decision that she faced when Elimelech died. And now she's going to face the same decision again. So how about you? When you choose to uproot yourself from the place that God has planted you, what does it take for God to get you back to the place where you're supposed to be? Maybe you're here today, and in an area of your life, you're living it in the land of Moab. Maybe you've remained in a place that God has not called you to. Maybe God is calling you to return to Him. You're prodigal. Would you come to Him? He is waiting with open arms. Maybe you left the ministry that God placed you in. Would you return? Maybe you left the community of God that God placed you in, and you're hanging out in the funeral-producing land of pagan Moab. Would you return to your community of faith? How about Naomi? After more than a decade, will she return? Verse 6. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab. For she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited His people and given them food. Naomi was working in someone else's field in Moab when God sent her some news. Her phone vibrated. She got the text. And the Lord, who had sustained His people during the famine, had now blessed them with an abundance. News spread far and wide that in the land of Judah there was about to be a big-time harvest, that the Lord had visited His people. Can you imagine? Naomi, she's in the field, she's working, she's old. She's working because that's the only way that she knows how that she's going to survive. Her 2 sons are dead, her daughters-in-law are barren, her husband's dead, and she's out working in the fields, just trying to scrape by. And then she gets the news that there's a bountiful harvest about ready to happen in her hometown in Bethlehem. She had to be thinking, what am I doing here? Why have I been here for over a decade? Verse 7. So she set out from the place where she was with her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. So she makes the decision, I'm not going to remain here anymore. I'm going to return to Bethlehem. She decides to return, and not just by herself, but Orpah and Ruth are going to come along as well. So the 3 ladies, they pack what they can. They pack what they can carry. They say their goodbyes. And they head on the road to Bethlehem. Now this says a lot about Orpah and Ruth, that they were willing to accompany their old mother-in-law to a place that they had never been. Naomi deeply loved both Orpah and Ruth. And both Orpah and Ruth deeply loved Naomi. And so they're heading, the three of them, they're walking down the dusty road on their way to the land of Judah. But then as they're walking, Naomi stops. And she looks at Orpah and Ruth. Verse 8. But Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, "Go, return each of you to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you've dealt with the dead and me. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and me." And so the next choice I want us to consider is kindness or not. Kindness or not. To be kind or not to be kind. It's always a choice. And Naomi compliments her daughters-in-law from the bottom of her grateful heart. She says, "You've dealt kindly with me, and you've dealt kindly with the dead." Mahlon and Chilion, her two sons. And I'm assuming Elimelech as well. They dealt kindly with the dead, with her family. Now, kindness is a key theme of this book, and we're going to unpack it in great detail in the next coming chapters, especially the kindness of the Lord. But for today, I just want us to consider this question: how kind are you to others? Because kindness is a choice. You can either choose to be kind or rude, kind or apathetic, kind or dismissive, kind or too busy, kind or self-centered, kind or stingy, kind or gossipy, kind or scheming. Love is kind. Jesus is kind. And being kind is a choice. So the question on the table for you and me is, do you intentionally practice kindness? Here's a little challenge for you this week. Why don't you be intentional about being kind? Be intentional about being kind. Perhaps if you're married, it would be nice if you were kind to your spouse. And you did one kind act a day. Just one kind act. It doesn't have to be anything big or over the top. It can be. But just one random intentional but random. Just be kind. Just be kind. Maybe it's to your sister or to your brother. Maybe it's to your mom or your dad. Maybe it's to a coworker or someone here at church. But wouldn't this world be a better place if we just were intentionally kind to one another? That if we looked for ways to out-kind one another. So this week, don't let a day go by without doing one little specific kind act to someone in your life. Naomi thanks Orpah and Ruth for their kindness and then continues in verse 9. She says, "The Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you, in the house of her husband." Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. So Naomi says, "Go back. Orpah, Ruth, go back. I got nothing for you. There's no reason for you to be on this trip. Go back." They kiss and they weep. This was an emotional, heartfelt moment. They pulled along the side of the road. They were sitting there, probably on a couple of rocks in the dust, crying up a storm. Verse 10. And they said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." Verse 11. But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and bear sons, would you therefore wait till they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me." And so 3 times in verses 8, 11, and 12, Naomi said, "Go back. Go back." And do you know why she's telling them to go back? Because she's pinned all of Orpah's and Ruth's hope on herself. My womb's empty. Even if I got a man tonight and somehow I had a kid, you guys maybe they're twins, you're going to wait till they're marrying age, you're going to wait a couple decades to have husbands for me. I can't offer you anything. But what she didn't realize is that Orpah and Ruth are heading back because of the Lord, not primarily because of Naomi. And so that brings us to our next choice. Either faith or fear. Either faith or fear. You see, at some level, Orpah and Ruth were demonstrating faith in the God of the Israelites by going with Naomi to Bethlehem. They knew that Naomi didn't have anything to offer. They were leaving the gods of the Moabites to go check out the God of the Israelites. And even though Elimelech and Naomi and Mahlon and Chilion weren't exemplary in how they lived out their faith, Orpah and Ruth had been around these guys for a decade, and they'd ask questions. What's the Lord like? Oh, he's got a book, the scriptures. What's this say? Has he ever delivered his people before? Has he ever cared for his people before? What's this God like? And they had over a decade to talk about what is God like. And through the imperfect testimony of Naomi and Elimelech and Mahlon and Chilion, Ruth and Orpah had enough to say, this God is worth more than these gods over here. And now Naomi, after being prodigal all this time, she's decided to return to Bethlehem, and Orpah and Ruth say, we're going along. And so they had enough faith to begin the journey of faith to Bethlehem. And Naomi says, turn back. So what will they choose? Will they continue to choose faith? Or will they be afraid of the unknown and turn back? Verse 14. Then they lifted up their voices and wept again. Man, these women are doing a lot of crying. They lifted up their voices and they wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law and turned and headed back to Moab. Ruth stayed by her side. Verse 15. Ruth says, see, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. Orpah turns back. She's chosen fear over faith. She chooses the familiarity of the Moabite gods instead of having faith in the one true living God. Ruth, however, turns the other way. She does not turn. She sees Orpah's silhouette as she heads down the road, and it's getting smaller and smaller. Her sister-in-law has gone back to the Moabite gods. And even though Orpah's faith has waned, Ruth remains steadfast. She's not afraid. She's not deterred by Naomi's less than exemplary faith walk and less than exemplary testimony and less than exemplary advice. She's not deterred because she's heard enough about the God of Israel that she's going to stake her claim to this God. Verse 16. But Ruth said, do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go. And where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Wow. Let's go Ruth, right? That is one of the most stunning, faith-filled professions in all of the scriptures. There's not one bit of fear in her words, just faith that this God of Israel, is the real deal. And she's headed to Bethlehem to see what he does, to see how he takes care of his people, to see what his people are like. And then in verse 17, she goes on with this bulldogish, relentless determination and faith. Look at verse 17. She says, where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me and more also, if anything, but death parts me from you. Do you see the statement of faith and the determination and the loyalty? Ruth said, Mama, I'm with you and your people and your God. And wherever you land, that's where I'm landing. And you know what? Whenever you die, I'm going to stay there because I'm going to be buried there. So if you die and I live another 10, 20, or 30 years, I'm still going to be in that same cemetery. She's pledging her faithfulness even after death. And how much faithfulness is she pledging? How intense is the statement? She swears an oath. She's been talking about death, about dying and where she's going to be buried. And then she says, may the Lord do so to me, death. May the Lord strike me down. May the Lord take my life. And more. If you can take more than your life. But she's pouring it on, right? May the Lord take my life and more, if anything but death parts me from you. That's a statement of faith. That she is going to go to where this God of Israel is. And her people, Naomi's people, are going to be her people. And she's going to stay by Naomi's side. And she's going to check this God out and get to know him because she's already declared her faith in him. They can't see Orpah's silhouette anymore. She's headed on back to Moab. And Naomi just looks at Ruth, and she's got to be stunned. She's thinking, this Moabite girl has more faith than most of the Israelites I know. She said, I'm going to go, and I'm going to stay, and I'm going to remain, and I'm going to hang out with your peeps, and your God is going to be my God. And even if you die, I'm not going back to Moab. I am not going to go back to Moab. Even after you die, I'm going to stay and live out my faith. Verse 18. And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. Naomi had no more words for this Moabite girl. She said, well, I've asked her 3 times to go back. She is not going back. She is heading to Bethlehem. I think that Naomi was probably starting to really question her level of faith. She had to be rewinding the events of her life. As they walk along, she has to be mulling over the day that she left Bethlehem. The day that her and Elimelech decided they'd go visit Moab. She had to be thinking about the day that her and Elimelech got together and decided to remain in Moab. Then she's probably thinking about the day that she buried Elimelech there in Moab and she decided to stay. She's thinking about these choices. She's thinking about Orpah's and Ruth's choice to be kind to her. She's thinking about all these things. She's thinking about the burial of her 2 sons. She thinks about her woman's group that she hasn't seen in over a decade. What will they say? How will she be received? What will she say? How will I answer the questions? How will they perceive me? Will this be a homecoming or will it be a ridicule? So this brings us to the last choice of the day, either pleasant or bitter. You can either choose to be pleasant or you can choose to be bitter. Verse 19. So the 2 of them, Naomi and Ruth, went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women said, is this Naomi? Is this Naomi? Naomi means pleasant. That's what her name means. It means pleasant. And so the 2 women are walking down the road and they enter into the town of Bethlehem. And all the women folk come out. There's this stir. And the women folk gather around and they look at her. They look in her face. She's older. She's tired. She's just walked a many-day journey. She's got a little bit of trepidation about exactly what's going to happen. The choices of her life have weighed her down. Verse 20. So they asked her, are you Naomi? In verse 20, she said to them, do not call me Naomi, which means pleasant. Call me Mara, which means bitter. For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. So Naomi's returned. She's come back home. She's with the people of God. The Lord has brought her back home. Even through all the junk that she's had to suffer through, even through all the trials and tribulations, the Lord has brought her back from the pagan land of Moab to Bethlehem. The place she was supposed to be, with the people she was supposed to be with. But she says, don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara. Because yeah, I made it home, but I'm bitter. I'm bitter. I'm mad at the Lord. She's probably mad at Elimelech and his part in deciding to go there. She's mad at herself. Don't call me pleasant. Call me bitter, because that's what I am. So how about you? When the decision is to be made, when you have the choice to either be pleasant or bitter, what is it? Do you see God's blessing despite your poor choices? Perhaps your poor choices have gotten you into a mess, but do you see through that and see that even in that God has a plan and a purpose, and that He has blessing for you? Or are you bitter because things just aren't perfect? Verse 21. Naomi continues her testimony. She said, I went away full. I went away full. I went away full. I went away full. Well, then why'd you leave? Was full not full enough? You know, a lot of times we're full, but for some reason, the Lord's blessings in our life, they're just not full enough. And so we take a trip to Moab. Now, hindsight's 20/20. But Naomi, this is her testimony. She said, I went away full. So why did you leave the land that you were supposed to be in? Why did you and Elimelech decide to go sojourn and then remain in Moab? You were full. Isn't it better to be full with the people of God going through a famine than to go chase more full and end up with 3 funerals? Naomi realizes that even in a famine, even in a tough time, she was full. I went away full. You know, the key is to figure out that you're full before you are a fool, and try to go get more full. Wherever you're at, if you know the Lord, let me just tell you this. If you know the Lord, wherever you're at in life, you're full. You are full because you have the Lord. And when tough times come, you need to lean in, even if there's a famine, even if there's a tough time. You need to lean into the fullness of the Lord. She said, I went away the full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Note there, I went away full. It was her choice to go away. But the Lord, in His kindness and graciousness, has brought her back. Even though she's walked through calamity, even though she's experienced funerals, even though she's experienced the land of pagan Moab, even though she's been estranged from her people and her extended family, the Lord, in His kindness, has brought Naomi back. I went away full, but the Lord brought me back, and she calls it empty. She says, I'm empty. She's not focusing on the fact that the Lord in His kindness has brought her back to the place where she's supposed to be, with the people that she's supposed to be, under the protection and the wings of the God that she's supposed to be with. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me? There's not a bit of thankfulness in Naomi's testimony that the Lord pulled her out of pagan Moab, pulled her out of her funk, pulled her out of her unfaithfulness, and brought her back to a place where there's about ready to be an abundant harvest. You can choose to be pleasant, or you can choose to be bitter. You can choose to be thankful, or you can choose to be ungrateful. You can choose to be pleasant even in bitter circumstances. Saints, you don't always get to choose your circumstances. There will be funerals. None of us are getting out of this alive. It's just the cold, hard fact. You will experience funerals, you will experience famines. But you can choose, even in the midst of those famines and those funerals and those tough times and those unforeseen circumstances and the mean and nasty choices that other people make and put on you, you can either choose to be pleasant or you can choose to be bitter. It's a choice. I would recommend walking in pleasantness and not bitterness. So we've looked at some choices today. Whether to stay or sojourn. Whether to return to the place that God has called you, or to remain in the land of Moab. We've looked at the choice of either kindness or not. The choice of either faith or fear, and the choice of pleasant or bitter. Verse 22 wraps up chapter 1 and sets us up nicely for our study next week with the hope of the harvest. Verse 22. So Naomi returned, and Ruth, the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab. And they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of barley harvest. So chapter 1 of Ruth has got a lot of calamity and a few funerals and a famine. But the end of chapter 1 ends with that line, they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. There is hope, there's abundance, there is provision in the house of bread, where God had called them to.